You know that little voice inside your head, the one that's constantly going I, me, and mine? Well, today, we're putting that voice under the microscope. We're going to explore the ego, but through the lens of ancient wisdom, specifically the teachings of SAMARTHA PRABODHA. We'll be digging into this powerful Sanskrit concept called ahankara to really understand the role it plays in, well, pretty much everything in our lives.
So here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll get right to the source and ask, where's this ego thing even come from? Then, we'll look at the telltale signs so you can spot it in action. After that, we have to talk about the dangers of letting it run the show. And, most importantly, we'll wrap up by looking at a real practical path to get beyond its grip.
Okay, let's dive right in. To really get a handle on the ego, you have to start at the very beginning, at its roots. So in this first part, we're going to define what it is and look at the perfect storm of conditions that helps it grow.
At the very core of this whole conversation is one word, ahankara. It literally means the I maker. It's that function of our mind that creates this feeling of I-ness, drawing a hard line between me over here and the rest of the world over there. And look, this isn't just about healthy self-esteem. Ahankara is seen as the actual root of pride, arrogance, and selfishness. It's the engine of the illusion that we're these totally separate, independent entities.
So what feeds this I maker? Well, the teachings point to 4 really powerful fuels. First, you've got youth, that feeling of being invincible, like you've got all the time and energy in the world. Then comes wealth, which can easily make you feel superior. Third is power, having authority and influence over other people. And the last one is a bit tricky, indiscrimination. This isn't just about being ignorant, it's a deeper blindness, an inability to see how fundamentally connected everything is. Any one of these can be like pouring gasoline on the fire of the ego.
All right, so that's the theory. We know what ego is and what feeds it, but what does it actually look like in the real world? In this next section, we're going to get super practical. We're going to learn how to recognize the ego's signature moves in our own thoughts and in the way people around us act.
You know, it's pretty incredible. The source boils down the ego's entire operating system to just 3 little words. I, mine, for me. That's it. That is the constant, quiet chant of ahankara. And once you start listening for it, you will hear it everywhere. Is this action really about I? Is this desire really about what's mine? Is the whole point just what's for me? This simple little phrase is basically the ego's calling card. And of course, that internal mantra, I, mine, for me, it doesn't stay internal for long. It spills out into our behavior. Think about that person who always has to be right, who needs to prove they're better. Or the person who's always showing off their car, their house, their title. What about that flash of anger you feel when someone corrects you, or even worse, ignores you? Or the classic, taking all the credit, saying, I did this, when you know it was a group effort. These aren't just quirky personality traits. They're the blinking red lights of a strong ahankara.
The source gives us this perfect little story about a wealthy man who would not stop bragging about his special German shepherd. But here's the thing, his pride had nothing to do with his love for the dog. It was all about how owning this impressive animal made him look. The dog wasn't a companion, it was just a shiny object, an accessory for his ego.
And here's another great example. Imagine a father whose son just won a big singing competition. He goes around telling everyone, my son won. The key word there is my. But later, when the son playfully points out that his dad doesn't know the first thing about music, the father gets incredibly angry. Why? Because his ego had completely attached itself to his son's victory. It became his victory, and so the son's comment felt like a direct attack on him.
Now these stories might seem like small, everyday things. A little bit of pride, right? What's the big deal? Well, when you let these patterns go unchecked, when they get bigger and bigger, the consequences can be absolutely devastating. And that brings us to the really serious part, the dangers of the ego, the very high price of I.
I mean, just look at our myths and legends. They are packed with these cautionary tales. You've got Ravana, a character of immense power and intellect, but his pride, his ahankara, was so massive it blinded him and led him straight to his own ruin. Or think about Duryodhana from the Mahabharata. His arrogance, his absolute refusal to share even a sliver of land, plunged an entire civilization into a catastrophic war. In both stories, it's the same culprit, that sense of I, mine, for me, spiraling out of control.
I mean, when you lay it out like this, the choice couldn't be more clear, could it?
The path of the egoist is a path of constant unrest and conflict, and it always ends in isolation and eventually a downfall. But the other path, the path of humility, of moving beyond the I, that leads to peace, to harmony, connection, and real, lasting progress.
So, this leads us to the million-dollar question, doesn't it? If this ego is so deeply ingrained, so powerful, and the consequences are so severe, how on earth do you even begin to conquer it? Is it even possible? Well, the great news is that the answer is a definite yes, and that's exactly what we're going to get into in our final section. The teachings don't just point out the problem and leave us there. They give us a clear, profound, and surprisingly practical guide to finding real freedom from the self. So, where do we start? The entire path beyond the ego. It all begins with one single gigantic shift in how we see the world. It's about moving from a belief in our own independence to a deep, gut-level recognition of interdependence. This one idea, it's the foundation for everything else. Let's just break this down for a second. The ego absolutely loves the myth of the self-made person. But think about it. Is anyone really self-made? Your life, a gift from your parents and generations of ancestors. The knowledge in your head, passed down to you by teachers. Your job, your success, it's only possible because a whole society exists to support it. Even the air you breathe is a gift from nature. So the ego's big claim, I did it all myself, when you really look at it, it's a complete delusion. Now, when you start to really see this web of connection, when you truly get it, something amazing happens. A quality starts to bubble up naturally, humility, or what's called vinaya. And this isn't about thinking you're worthless, not at all. It's about thinking of yourself less. It's the natural antidote to the ego's poison, because it's just an honest recognition of your true place in the grand scheme of things. And the Source gives us this beautiful quote to take it even a step further. It speaks to a kind of surrender, a letting go. It's an acceptance that we are not the sole puppet masters of our lives. Call it divine will, call it the universe, call it whatever you want. Recognizing that bigger forces are always at play is what finally dissolves the ego's illusion that it's in total control. So we can really boil this whole path down into 3 clear steps. First, you acknowledge. You consciously work to see your connection to everything and everyone. From that acknowledgement, you move into the daily practice of humility, making choices based on being part of a whole. And finally, that leads to surrender. Releasing that white-knuckled grip on how things should be and trusting in the larger flow of life.
When you get right down to it, this whole journey is about a huge transformation. It's about shifting out of that lonely, exhausting, isolated bubble of I and stepping into the incredible strength, peace, and connection that comes from living as part of a much bigger, much more beautiful we.
So I'll leave you with a question to carry with you. Just for today, what is one single thought, maybe about an accomplishment, a possession, or an opinion, that you're holding with that I, mine, for me energy? And can you just take a minute to really look at it and see the huge invisible web of other people, of history, of nature that is actually holding that one thing up? Thanks for joining me on this.